so when did this? How did you get interested in language? When did this project start?
Those are two very different questions.
I know, and I'm breaking the number one rule, which is not to ask more than one question at a time. But I have so many, I'll have to try and pace
But
myself.
I can join it, but they're different things, because
Okay.
like my first interest in language was when I was a child, and I was just surrounded by languages, which seemed like a really weird kind of magic, especially. So I grew up on the outskirts of East London. So, you know, you would go I'd go into the post office with my mum, for example, and the lady would be like shouting across from the till to the post office glassy bit to her husband in Urdu, I think, but not that I know anything about languages then, but like with the sound it left in my memory, I think it might have been Urdu. And then just switch to this like Queen's English with my mum. And that was just what. And then my family is Cypriot, so they were speaking Greek in their case, Cypriot Greek in the family, and I never learned it when I was a kid. So it was always just something totally intangible and fascinating.
So you were not like a magically enormously talented with languages growing up?
I had no study in language until I was an adult. I was 18.
Oh, wow.
I started a law degree and I changed from law to language.
This is so optimistic to hear this, right? Because I think in my head, I'm like, yeah, it's nice that you developed this method, but
everybody
most
thinks
likely it's just like a polyglot and like naturally
I have to work
talented.
very, very hard. But that's
really?
I had to work very hard on everything I did. And I wanted to share that, you know, like I started this language degree and I was for the first semester the worst in the class. Like I didn't understand, you know, there's certain things, there's a lot that when hold on, I'm just going to do a preemptive measure, get my cat out.
Okay.
Oh,
hello. Hello.
Hello.
What's his name?
I just call him Radagi, which just means little cat. But if he needs a birth certificate, I'll make one up. What were we saying?
That you started out and it was very difficult at the language.
Oh yeah, okay. So I think one of the general problems in teaching is that the longer you teach, the more disconnected you are from all the stuff that the person you're teaching doesn't know. So to put that in a simpler way, you just take more and more for granted. So to think of and the neurodiversity means that different children or different students generally will have different different ways of thinking that leads them to take different things for granted, right? So to give you an example, I started to go to Greek school when I was a kid very briefly. And I remember like learning the alphabet, which was just copying the alphabet down off the board, but with no explanation, nothing to help me understand what another language even is. So I used to just think it was like a code that you would write English in. So I found it really kind of, how do you say?
Like phonetically in a way?
Yeah, so I found it really debasing, so to speak, that it had a different number of letters, because I could never understand that. I could never get my head around that. You know, if it's just like
it's just code. Another code.
Yeah, to write English.
It's a secret language. Why would you have a different number of
elements? You know, so generally, so I mean, I had just the least amount of language consciousness I can imagine now that my mind is so different and I see things in such a different way, to look back and just to find it really took me ages to even understand that the verbs in Spanish were changing to match the person. Do you know what I mean? Like it took me a good while to figure out that that's what was going on.
And yet it was very something in that really attracted you, like the mystery or the understanding that mystery, because, you know, like someone else might be just like, okay, so this is not for me. right?
Well, yeah, I mean, that's how I was thinking, right? So this is not.
But you did go to study.
So, I mean, I was having that experience of this is not for me. And then in a materials development class, we came across this Michelle Thomas material, which uses this kind of basic Socratic system, which I use.
Okay.
This question and answer system, right? So this is like this is like that. How do you say whatever? So just doing that got me far enough that I could employ my usual very like analytical, obsessive pattern hunting way of thinking. Like I wasn't lost anymore. So that sent me into a mental overdrive. I became like super fluent, like native level in no time at all. Like all my teachers were like, what's going on? They were dragging me around the departments.
So in a way you developed like some shadow study program for yourself with the materials that you've got. Like, this is working for me. It's not the highway. It's not the way that everyone is teaching it, but this works for me. And you started teaching yourself to some extent.
Yeah.
And then you became a phenomenon, and they all thought that you were like very talented, or that they were very good teachers.
Well, yeah, that's how they prefer to interpret it, of course. So they would like drag me around the department, like, look what we've achieved with this guy. But it was definitely just something that could break past all of what just being exposed to Spanish was not breaking past. But then, you know, there was this extra element of, you know, like where you go from there, no? So it was just, it was enough to understand some important concepts, right? About the difference between, like, intuitively understand the difference between language and thought, for example.
Can you give me a concrete example?
Of what?
Of like that transformation from, you know, thinking how like you would normally try and be like, you know, banging your head against the wall, and then suddenly realizing with logic.
When you were like all language teaching, when you get taught a language, you're just being told like vertical information that you need to memorize. If you haven't had to learn another language or really think about language generally, if you don't have a lot of language consciousness, so to speak, it's kind of just loose information. You never really know how to put it together. So there was two things groundbreaking for me about the Michelle Thomas material, and that was the fact that you were learning things horizontally. So you were building sentences, which means you need to learn a little bit different from, you know, different things from each area of the language. And that there was a total freedom there in that you could teach anything in any order that you wanted. So I really liked that. And then for this materials course development part of my degree, I took that freedom. And then when we had to develop material to show to our teachers, I did it kind of from that perspective, and they just like didn't fail me by 1 mark. So for everything, they wouldn't fail me by 1 mark because they didn't like what I was doing.
Wow, interesting. Yeah. What it was like a different.
The only reason I didn't fail,
shift.
I mean, I didn't fail because I was doing so well in Spanish. So, you know, the teachers talk and they're like, no, this is our star pupil, and they're like, oh, well, we hate him.
But it's like it's an interesting sign that you're pushing against the existing paradigm.
Yeah, I mean, you can do that in a useless way as well and get a bad mark, but I don't think this was, right? So, I mean, it's never been for me about this approach in itself, right? So this approach in itself has as much potential to cause chaos and confusion and breakdown as it does to cause a learning experience like those.
It has a name other than being a Socratic approach, but does it
so for me, there's the difference between, and there were some legal, or there are, I don't know, some legal issues here in regards to, so the company that this Michelle Thomas, who's now passed away, was recording courses with, have patented the pause button. So as far as they're concerned, the pausing and making the sentence is the method.
I see.
And for me, that's like, no, Michelle Thomas didn't do that. That was Socrates with no pause button. This whole general approach. And that's not the method. The method is what you do with that time, right?
Right.
So, the approach, I'm happy to say the general approach is the same, but the method for me is very different. So, the language transfer method is called the thinking method, which started as a kind of ironic name, but it stuck.
Can you unpack the irony for me?
Well, the fact that we're not generally taught to think, right? We're generally just exposed to like, this is what you don't know, go and know it, right? And I've written a book about the method. It's very long and boring, like 450-page book. But
it's pretty accessible, right? I've noticed. No.
Yeah, it's free. It's available for free PDF, but like hard copies as well, and what have you. So I'm very interested in unpacking these essential ideas beyond language now as well. So I started to make a music course, and that's to show.
But first, how did this? Yeah, but I'm going to drag you back a few years just to get a sense of how it developed, and then a lot of people got attracted to it, right? So when did you decide to do something for world peace?
Well, to be honest, I was it's complicated. So I was working at NGOs in Argentina. I was living in Argentina, and I was also studying violin and what have you. And I got very disheartened with the NGOs. As anybody working in an NGO moderately sincere with themselves will probably end up being, and decided that I wanted to dedicate myself to music, and was just teaching classes to pay for all of that. I had experiences teaching English to Spanish speakers that made me realize like the value of my material, and that I needed to make it available for free. And then also kind of like trying to wrestle with myself, trying to understand how I was going to fulfill this need for impact that I was searching at the NGOs. I realized, the course can be that. So my idea was just to record English for Spanish speakers in Spanish. It was a contribution to the Spanish speaking world before I said bye-bye. And
I see.
Started this Cyprus period in my life. And then I came to Cyprus, and
was that the first time that you lived in Cyprus?
Yeah, it was the first time I lived here. I came when I was a kid for a holiday only, but my parents are, my whole family is Cypriot. Like, there's a very big diaspora in London. I think more Cypriots are born in London than in Cyprus.
Really? I didn't know that.
I think so. Or is it more in London? Yeah, I think it is. But that's just because they count everyone with Cypriot descent as Cypriot, right? But anyway. So I came here, and in part of my like de-indoctrination regarding the Cyprus problem, I saw impact here for what I knew how to do, right? But that means I needed to learn Greek and Turkish, and
which you didn't know at that time.
I didn't know.
Incredible.
And teach them. But like, what is the best way to teach yourself is writing through ideas and finding that some of them are wrong, and etc., right? So I started to do that, and that was at the same time that I kind of like accidentally started this Occupy Buffer Zone movement, where we went to the buffer zone dividing the capital and slept there to protest the division that we want to be together, etc. And I edited some of the first Greek course there. I remember, like, there's a photo. I've got this giant headphones on, which there's later a video.
Sounds like an exciting period.
Destroying with an axe. Yeah, it was, and we were riding off the back of like the Arab Spring and all of this kind of like global and Occupy and global celebration of protest, which I don't think that went to the best place, but at the time it was a nice kind of crash to be doing this stuff in, right? So we could really push.
Yeah, we're going to bring down Wall Street, right?
Like we could push much more than what we would have done. Right. I mean, everybody ended up getting beaten up by the police in the end. I wasn't there, but I mean, I'd left already. But that would have happened much sooner than what we did do it now. Do you know what I mean? Because I was there for months. it started in October and the police raid was in April, but I'd left.
Can I ask you how your parents responded to that? You going back to Cyprus and suddenly getting involved politically? And I mean, I'm a psychologist, so forgive me, that's my angle.
Well, I don't have contact with my father since I was a teenager. And neither of them presented me with Cypriot culture in any other way that was really direct. I mean, they are a direct result of the empire and the diaspora. It's very clear in their social, political, cultural failings that they are, but like I said, they didn't talk to us in Greek, even though I was asking for them when I was a kid and whatever. So it was odd for me to do this. So I guess that was my whole family's like, what is he doing? But to be honest, I think it was like the Argentine version of myself, let's say, because I went there, when I was like 20 or something, 21, and assimilated entirely as you do when you're that young, and especially if you have something you don't want to go back to,
right?
And then that guy was like, oh, that's interesting, I'm an interesting like product of this also like through language you start learning about the world, right? Like the British Empire and all this
for sure
you did not learn about at school growing up in the UK. So then you start realizing like, oh, the people I've come to study through studying language, those interesting anthropological phenomena in the world, oh, I'm one of them. and then I wanted to go and investigate what that meant. So characteristic of my like very sharp decision making, I just bought a piano. I was living in a bedsit, got this like full-size piano into a bedsit, and then like 6 weeks later I'm like, I have to leave, and I sell everything and I come to Cyprus.
Wow. And so then people started to get interested in what you're doing, right?
Well, yeah, Cyprus is a perfect kind of platform for that because it's a really small place with not a lot of people doing a lot of stuff. So it was the perfect place to come and play at doing something, And I didn't know any of that, but it was just like 5 minutes in to having released a bit of material. Like I'd be walking around with a language transfer t-shirt on and people would be like, oh, you're from language transfer. Oh, cool. I heard about it. And that was insane for me. Like I was really young.
Well, coming from such a huge place like London.
And also like just this weird disconnect in Cyprus, to get that kind of reception, just generally to hear something
so relevant.
Just to hear something that is like something that you invented in your head, and then suddenly it's a thing. You're from
the world.
You're from language transfers.
Yeah, but like other people suddenly relate to that as an object in the world. It has, right? That it has like it exists, not just in your head.
Yeah. But I don't. There's elements of that I don't really understand, and like I don't understand the outreach, and it's not something I follow actively. Like occasionally I have to go into some site metric, something for app guys or whatever, and I see like user figures, and I occasionally usually every time that happens I share it because it's the first time in 3 months, and then I can't believe like what the user figures are. But it's not something really that I understand, so to speak, and that's good because then I think you have all kinds of problems managing and regulating your identity and sense of self, like when you're subject to so much celebration, because it's surprising of feedback that the project gets, and so like on the app I don't go and read it, like just too much. I can get
you don't want to get hooked on that.
Yeah, like I can get through 2 or 3 and I can realize that hormonally or something, I can feel these little things being released.
Of course.
I'm like, that's not a rabbit hole I want to go down.
Absolutely. From a psychological perspective, I can say, you're very right to be cautious. Two elements here that really need to be taken into account. A is that dopamine, like the brain only responds to a relative increase in dopamine, not to the absolute quantity of dopamine in your brain. So if you go from 0 to 2, that's a huge increase. But then if if again you get like a shot that equals 2, it's the same. Then it's from 2 you went to 2. There's no increase, so suddenly the same, right? And then the other thing is that the brain processes joy and suffering, in a way, pleasure and pain in the same area, and it's like a seesaw thing where
I definitely made a lot of mistakes in that sense with my way of working. Like I made everything I'm saying that's smart about the way of dealing with the positive feedback. I did.
You've learned the hard way.
But I did it wrong. I mean, in the sense of I've been working at 3 languages at the same time. So that's reading, about writing, editing, teaching for 3 different languages at once, all day and all night. And then I noticed that even though I was suffering, that my brain was addicted to it. And I understood that I'd fallen into all these mistakes. I had to do a lot of work that I'm still doing to work in a healthy way. But with the feedback, I guess just because I've had quite like a hard life in regards to other people, dealing with other people, it was very immediately obvious there was a really dangerous potential for too much positive feedback. Like I read 2 more of these and I'm going to be an asshole all day, kind of thing.
Interesting. So but then you did manage to sort of allow other people in to take it forward, to develop new courses for more languages.
No,
how did that happen?
So far it's all me. So all the languages that you see so far, I made them all. I'm trying to open
so how many languages you speak right now?
So I mean I made to publishing level, because there's more that I fiddled with other languages, but I've made 9 courses now, but I don't use all of those languages. So some, like Swahili, for example, I think it might be the most comprehensive Swahili course like in the world. And I've never had a conversation in Swahili because I've never had the opportunity, and I've looked for them. But I work with native speakers to like check my material and blah, blah, blah. There's a process there to make sure that, that what I'm saying is correct. And after doing quite a few languages, I kind of, one part, I didn't have the need as much to have a long period practicing the language to teach it. But for the other part, because of the time pressures and all of the pressures on the project and all of what everybody was asking for, which I couldn't handle emotionally, that now I've got much better at being laid back. Like I bypassed that period. Like there's languages that I never used that I made the courses for. Now I'm focusing on getting native speakers trained in the method, and then me taking where I'm helping 4 to 8 people at once.
And how come it takes I imagine it takes a lot of dedication to keep making all this stuff available for no cost to people everywhere. Why aren't you going into a pay per something model?
Well, like I said, I was at this time of my life when I was trying to understand how I was going to balance my different needs, and one of those is a need for impact. Like I have it very I know for a lot of people it's fashionable lately and they all drive me crazy, like this social warrior kind of persona and whatever. But for me, it's a very unavoidable need that I have tried to escape from and get away from and reclaim freedom over my life. But I understand, and it might be a psychological problem, but I need to the positive things that make me feel good. So that's discovery, learning, blah, 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 blah. I need to do impact with it. It feels like a waste that it stops at me. I think it's just a personality trait, to be honest.
So you didn't want any to put any brake on your impact, and so this is why it's widely available.
Yeah, I'm motivated by impact. So if I was selling these courses, I don't think I would be motivated to make such good courses.
I see.
Like these are literally the best courses money can't buy, because if I was selling them, I would be thinking how to make the best selling courses.
Actually,
Language
Right.
transfer was very slow getting going because there was a high level of trust needed for people to actually try it and go, this guy isn't a loon. Now, that we don't have that anymore because anyone looks at the feedback and they trust it and they give themselves into it. But before that, you know, that wasn't the case. So if I was thinking about money, I would have done things in a very different way, right? To get people in. Whereas
that's a beautiful way to put it, and it's a very good explanation. I think I get a better picture now. So how did you move into the music appreciation course that's being offered now?
So I want to show that the method works for things that aren't for other things other than language, because there's certain concepts. And I just published today, actually, that I'm offering these workshops internationally because I gave one here a little while ago and I really enjoyed it, to train teachers just generally how they can apply the ideas of the method to their subject area, whatever the subject area is. So I wanted to demonstrate that. And then I went back to the first love that I gave up to make language transfer. So I gave up, like I sold my violin for paying for language transfer costs. I'd given up paying for some years and now I've gone back to it. And, I had exactly the same experience I had in my musical education that I had in language education, which is just like, this is a perfect fifth, this is a major third, this one comes with that one, because, and it's like, but why? So it's partly something I owe to myself, to do it for music, but I wanted to do a subject that wasn't languages to help expand this project. So, I want people to be able to learn anything from chemistry to gastronomy through this method, which is not so much a method, to learn things, but a way of looking at and understanding them, which informs how you learn them. But for me, it's got a lot to do with just a different way of engaging with the world, which is much more conscious, much more taking in consideration your emotions.